The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Sunrise Lane, our game of the week, discuss tips for GenCon First-Timers in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five hilarious games. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's going on, Doug? How are you?
I am fantastic. How about you?
Yeah, good. Doing well. Which episode is this? Things are starting to run together.
This is 183, Michael.
That's what I thought. Wow, so we're trucking right along.
They just keep piling up. That's what's weird about it.
They do.
They don't slow down, and every week it seems like it's a bigger number.
Yeah, no, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that my run sheet was accurate.
Okay.
So always a good thing to make sure that I have an accurate run sheet. So I'm good. How about you?
Good. I've got some follow-up. I want to remind everybody to check out last week's episode if you missed it. We did a full, as well as we could, a full Gen Con recap of all of the games we saw and some of the sights and sounds, and it was very well received, and people seemed to enjoy it. It was a huge, long episode, so if you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to that. There's a lot of gems and nuggets in there.
Well, there's a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
Gems and nuggets that could be argued.
To the eye of the beholder.
That's right. I held off on listening to all post-Gen Con coverage until after our show, so I've been enjoying catching up on other podcast Gen Con coverage as well, and there's so much that we still didn't even see, even in that exhibit hall.
I know.
It's just insane. Its own little city. It's not a village. It's a city or a kingdom.
With poor sanitation and some other good infrastructure. But another area of follow-up, check out on YouTube right now, we've got a new Marvel United overview video. So Marvel United is a game we talked about on the very first episode, and then we revisited it in episode 157. So if you just want to see what that looks like on the table and just get a kind of a brief overview, check that out. That's on our YouTube page as well.
Probably one of your favorite 10 games of all time, right? If you just had to generate a list today, Marvel United would be up there for you, wouldn't it? Or no?
Probably. Certainly the amount of joy that a game has given me in regards to painting and everything around the game. I wish I played it more than I do. It always seems like, well, I'll just get these last 5 minis painted, and then I'll sit down, and then another Kickstarter comes and there's 150 more minis to paint. So that can keeps getting kicked, and I don't like it, but it happens.
The project just makes you work.
Yeah.
They make you do work. Oh, that's good.
Thanks, Simon. Any follow-up for you?
Yeah, I have one thing from, it's kind of follow-up, it's kind of what's awesome, but I was looking at our Discord and some of the conversations that are going on, and one individual said, I'm going to need a side hustle to afford all these games just based on our hype episode last week.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to put out there, if I could go back to 2018 and tell myself one thing, relating to the hobby, of course, it would be, don't get more than 3 to 5 games in a single month, because there's no way you're going to get those played. So no matter how excited you are, just think about that. And that new gamer enthusiasm is awesome, but it can also be a bit scary. And I'm not saying that the person who made that comment had that. It very much could have come off as a compliment. It's just one of those things. We try not to get into the consumerism of the hobby, and I know that how much excitement and engagement I had with last week's episode. But please, if the great games will be around for a long time. So
well, and they're not going to stop coming out, and it's certainly this isn't a poor me statement, but when you bring home a bunch of games from a convention and I am looking at them and it's like, I don't know when I'm going to get through all of these. How am I going to get through all of these?
Poor Doug.
Yeah, I know. But I think you're spot on with that 3 to 4. Before I had a podcast, that would probably be about what I would bring into the house, and they would get played. It's like, and because you're excited about it, and they're immediately getting into the rotation and the queue to get played at a table.
Yeah.
It's funny
and
that
replayed at a table, too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you should mention that, because one of the things that I have in What's Awesome in Gaming has to do with what some may perceive as maybe a negative, but the idea of, I have been, through the past several months, we've been talking about the games on my shelf, right? And I have been doing some serious culling and changing the way that I think about consuming games and getting rid of games. And it's a journey that starts with when you get into the hobby and you're excited about every new game that you get and you can't wait to play it. And even if it's not that good, you are like, I spent $30 on this and I love it and it will never leave my collection. And as you get more and more games, you then start to evaluate the games that are in your collection. And I think I'm going back, and it's hard because we are reviewing games, so we're getting a lot of different games. It's very difficult to go back and play old favorites. And I am getting to the point where I think about a year ago, I had told you I want to start thinking about games more like movies and a night out and an experience. And if it doesn't work, not feeling bad about maybe not getting the money out of it. And when I first got into the hobby, it was a situation where, if you got a game, there was a good chance that it was going to hold its value for a while. But eventually they started printing so many games that didn't exist anymore. You couldn't, and you and I went to the consignment sale at Gen Con, and you see games that were getting talked about just last year, and they're not moving off of the table. People don't want to buy them, and they were amazing, quote, amazing games last year. And it just kind of reaffirmed. Whoop, I think you're muted, Michael.
Oh, bad moments in podcasting, Doug. Yeah. And some of them, $45 new and shrink at a consignment sale. I didn't mean to just completely hijack your train of thought, but that was another, whoa.
So I've gotten to the point of the amount of effort that I'm going to put into moving and trying to maximize my investment in a game and limiting that. And I'm being much more open to the idea of like, yes, I'm taking those games to a Goodwill. Maybe I could try and sell them online and get $10, but I'm going to give them to a nice home. Or I'm going to bundle up a whole bunch of them and take them over to our local store, Noble Knight, and they buy and sell and, trade games, that type of thing. And just being a little bit quicker with the moving on and how much extra weight, I guess pulling it back around to what's awesome about that is the extra weight off of my mind and just emotionally that baggage that's kind of gone, that's in my mental overhead compartment of just like sitting and looking at games. It's like, yeah, that one really didn't work for me. And it's like, I don't know, I might be able to get $15 on it. It's like, no, get $5 and move on.
Yeah.
And it's been really kind of freeing to do that. And I'm just always fascinated by that process where I had that thought a year ago, and I think I said the same thing to you right after Gen Con, but for whatever reason, emotionally, I wasn't ready to act on it.
Right.
Even though I thought mentally, yes, that makes sense. And think about it like a movie. I take my kids to a movie, and you spend $35, and you spend an hour, and it's done. I don't get to keep the movie, and I don't take the movie with me. And maybe thinking about board games more as entertainment as opposed to collection.
Okay.
So, but I'm fascinated on that journey, and you have talked. We've talked off the air of like some of the stuff of yours with New Gamer Enthusiasm and the cycles that we go through. It was like, why is this in my collection? Time to move on, and that type of stuff fascinates me.
what about breaking down boxes? Like you have an expansion box that you no longer need, right? Like, does this, if I were to destroy this box in front of you and put it into recycling, would that harm you, or are you okay with that? Like, what do you think there, Doug?
I don't care.
You don't care. That doesn't bother you, huh?
It's your game, so do whatever you want with it. The second thing
recycling
is if it's a game I think I'm going to keep, I definitely do that.
Yeah.
For sure. And
so for folks who aren't watching us live on the YouTube, I just took the Tapestry Plans Employees box and I had to, it was a little bit sturdier than what I
you
thought,
struggled there.
Yeah, I need to get back in the weight room a little bit.
Some sweat on your brow.
Not quite, just shiny forehead that time of day. But, I've got the folded inserts going, so been building those. That's what's awesome in gaming for me. And that means I'm getting rid of some boxes because being able to take expansions and put them into a bigger box for games that I know that I want to keep. So some of that, too, is just I don't have to keep everything out on the shelf to showcase it on the shelf. I can break stuff down and get it into a box and be a little bit smarter about things too. So,
well, and I think your mentality over the past 6 months of a phrase you've commonly said is like, when and who am I going to play this with? And if that well,
that's your phrase that I've taken. So yes.
I used it as counseling for
full,
you, and then
full
you
propaganda.
Yeah, but it's a great qualifier. You know, where I was looking at a couple of games, I'm like, yeah, I kind of like the game, but who am I going to play it with? And when I have so many great games, when am I going to get this one to the table? What is going to spur this to come off the shelf? And what was amazing when you're going through that consignment sale is the number of games that I looked at, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I had that in my collection at one time. I had that game. I had that game. And not once did I look at any of those games and be like, ooh, I wish I had that one back. Sure. Even if they were games I liked and enjoyed. It's like, oh, yeah, that was kind of a good game. Yeah, I used to have that one. Oh, well, moving on, So the fire hose of games that come out is just hard to control.
Yeah, it is, and that's where I'm glad that we're here doing this too. Yeah, to go through and to take one game and tell the story of it and talk about a few other games. And speaking of, have you played anything recently with your kiddos, your family, other friends?
Well, I played our game of the week, so that was a good one. Outside of that, no, a couple of some of the Gen Con ones, but nothing I'm ready to talk about yet. How about you?
So we keep playing Kabanga from Amigo, and I should know the designer of this. I don't have it up in front of me at the moment. It was our game of the week back in, I think, episode 179. It's getting played with multiple groups and combinations in our house. Absolutely having a ton of fun with that. Especially my 8-year-old really enjoys playing that. There's something about throwing the cards at people and saying Kabanga. And if you didn't hear that episode, you can just go back and listen to it. Very simple card game that has some strategy in it as well and gets harder as the game goes on. And I mean, we're playing a lot of that. And then last night we got a play of the gang in. We had some neighbors that just stopped in. They kind of, they're friends, and they like to hear about the oddities of Gen Con. So we were just swapping stories, and we got a game of Kabanga in, but then we also played the gang. And, when you and I got a demo of that, we had heard that it gets difficult with the more people you get. And I'm looking forward to us diving into that at different player counts. We played one game at 4 players and won easily. The next game at 5 players, we got destroyed. So that's what we've been up to.
Interesting. That one of the things that you mentioned, those 2 games, but I'm thinking about some of the other games that we have for Gen Con. One of the things that I'm really excited about that's awesome is the amount of games that I feel like that have come out. And I don't know if I've just paid attention to them more, or we got better demos of them, or I'm looking out for them more. But a handful of games that I think are going to do really well in the after-school board game club. Yeah. And that that early teenager age range that's just like, all right, here's a game. We saw a bunch of them at Gen Con where I'm like, yeah, we can set this out on the table and they're going to go to town and they're going to be having a blast. So I'm excited to get some of those to the table and even get them in front of the board game club just to see what they think.
Yeah.
Because I think there's going to be a lot of highlights coming out of this year's Gen Con that for whatever reason maybe weren't in the past.
Right. And that really fit, I want to say, our market, folks that are listening to us on a regular basis, where I'm excited to continue to play some of the games to just see where they work for player count, age count, experience on where gamers are at as well. Because in that initial play of the game, you could tell the folks who knew the basic mechanics of poker had an advantage, right?
Yeah.
And even just knowing pair, flush, straight, it moved a lot smoother. And then the other thing, I just got a little one shot of D&D, and do you know what my D&D character's name is, Doug, by chance?
I feel like it's in a text message, but I don't make a personal note of it.
Mick Reiner. So, son of Reiner. So, leveling up all the time. I think I'm all the way up to no, I am a half-elf ranger.
Oh, classic.
Yeah.
So you took the exact opposite of your height.
I did, but I'm tall for the half elf.
Oh, sure,
so I'm
of
60
course.
years old and 6 foot, 170 pounds, little sleek half elf. But just got up to level 3. So and I'm still told by my eldest child that that's not something you should brag about, Dad. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. We're in tier 1 of this D&D Adventure League, so I'm getting to the higher end of the tier 1. Before you know it, we might be in tier 2. Then I'll be able to brag. So just really, it's had a lot of fun. It was nice to get a night out and to get back into that again. It had been a long time, and I'll tell you what, we're just very fortunate where we live to have so many different types of gaming communities that are just open and cool. The people that run the Adventure League could not be more just helpful. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I stumble through that every time I show up, and so that's kind of a cool thing and a cool part of the hobby as well. You want to see where people drop money. Holy cow, Doug! There's some money in Dungeons and Dragons and dice, and dice protectors and shields, and you wouldn't believe it. So
I think for Christmas I'm going to get my dad. My dad plays bunco with my youngest daughter like almost daily, and I happen to take him. He is not a gamer by any stretch of the imagination.
I disagree.
And he took a trip with me to Noble Night one time. I had some errands to run. I asked him if he wanted to go. And so we're sitting around waiting, and he's looking at the dice, and he found these $6, like a little bin, of the tiniest dice in the world. And he goes, this would be funny to play bunco with Molly. So I'm going to go pick that up for him for Christmas, or maybe his birthday. His birthday's coming up. So I'm going to get him like the smallest dice in the world for him and Molly to play bunco. And she'll
That's
just think
awesome.
that's crazy. Maybe then for Christmas I'll get him like giant D6s.
Yeah, there you go. Where else are you having bunco and Dungeons and Dragons in the same opening segment, folks?
Yeah, what a menagerie. Anything else awesome for you?
No, just two quick. Yes, I do. Two quick things. One, a crowdfunding update. Phil Walker Harding and Joey Games have a new campaign going. It's called Koala Rescue Club, and it's with Postmark Games. So for $6, you can get a print and play version of the newest game designed by Phil Walker Harding and his wife. I should have looked up his wife's name. I think it's Miranda, does the art. And it's the same group that did Scribbly Gum, which has been a game of the week, and two other games as well in a previous Kickstarter. So I think that's cool. And for folks who aren't familiar with Postmark, it's a print and play company where you can do it in black and white on your printer if you want, or you can go to town and get a really nice color version and laminate it, and a lot of different ways to go with that. So just wanted to share that because we continue to play Sushi Go, that 10th anniversary edition, getting that new edition in our house with some of those goodies that are given away in it that I will not spoil, with the other little plushies and the little ship that comes in the 10th anniversary edition. We've just been playing the heck out of that. So Just a little Phil Walker Harding praise here in the opening segment.
Yeah,
You can never have too much of that.
No, speaking of that, I enlisted my oldest daughter to help me with the kids game culling to see if there was anything that we can move on from there. And she immediately said, well, we're not getting rid of those, and pointed to the 3 Joey games. It's like, well, those are obviously staying, so let's move on to the next shelf. So high praise there for the Phil Walker Harding games from Joey Games. So we've talked about it a little bit, but check out our Discord. We're adding new members all the time. You can sign up by going to gameschooler.com/Discord. It's a great community, and you will feel very welcome. It's very positive, and a lot of cool discussions happening there daily. Spread the word about the podcast. Let people know that you like what we're doing here, and share this podcast with a friend. Send them a link. Anything you can do helps us get more listeners, and we appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, reach out to us. Email at gameschooler.com. We'd love to hear from you. Again, email at gameschooler.com. And if you want to communicate with us directly, we are often in the Discord as well to respond to questions there. So if you're more comfortable there, do that as well. Gameschooler.com/Discord. With that out of the way, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Sunrise Lane by Dr. Rainer Knizia and published by the Horrible Guild. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, published in 2023. Michael mentioned the Horrible Guild is the publisher, designer Dr. Rainer Knizia. The art is by Francesco De Benedictis. 2 to 4 players, 45 minutes, ages 8+ on the box. Board Game Geek says 8+, and I'm going to agree with that.
I agree with that as well. I've played this
good
game
range
with
there.
8-year-olds.
And this is going to fall into the family game category. In Sunrise Lane, players take on the role of construction companies attempting to build up a residential neighborhood. The game board depicts a grid of spaces that each show 1 to 5 dots in a single color. And each player has a set of colored house pieces. And the player colors have no connection to the spaces on the board. On a turn, you'll either draw 2 colored cards from the deck and add them to your hand with a limit of 5 cards in hand, or discard cards to place a building and then draw a card. When you build, you must build adjacent to a pre-existing structure or the central space at the start of the game. And you must discard 1 or more cards of the same color as the dots in the space in which you want to build. So, for example, if you want to build in the pink space, you will need to discard pink cards. You can discard 1 to 5 cards, after which you'll place 1 to 5 of your house pieces. They stack on top of each other. So if you discard 3 pink cards, you will add 3 of your buildings stacked on top of each other on the pink space. Then you are going to score points equal to the number of dots on the space multiplied by the number of house pieces you placed. So if that happened to be a 5 pink board space and you placed down 3 buildings of your color, you would score 15 points for that building placement. You can build multiple buildings on a turn as long as you build your next one adjacent to the last one you built. So you can kind of chain off each other, and you can build a 1 card building, a 1-piece building, and then another 1-piece building, and then a 2-piece building if you want. When a player has 2 or less house pieces in their supply, the game ends. And then players... and that's going to be an equal number of rounds. So everybody's getting the same number of turns. So if the last player in turn order happens to be the first one with less than 2, then the game's going to end immediately. Otherwise, everybody will get the same number of turns. Then players are going to score endgame points with there are 4 districts in the game divided up on the board. 2 of those districts are going to award points for the highest building in that district. So 10 points for the highest building, 6 points for the next highest building, and 3 points for the third highest building. And ties are then broken by if I have a 3-level building and Michael has a 3-level building in the same district, but then I have a 2 and Michael only has a 1, then I would break the tie and get the 10 points. The other 2 districts, and they are opposite of each other, so they kind of form an X, score for who has the most buildings in that district. So it's just counting up the most buildings in those districts, and you get 10 points if you have the most in each one, 6 if you have the second most, and 3 again. Additionally, there are points that go to the player with the longest group of adjacent buildings. So if you are familiar with Ticket to Ride, something like whatever your longest route is, you will score points for whoever has the longest one of connected buildings. And so that is the game. It's fairly simple, and it plays super fast.
Yeah, very fast.
It is one of the things that I like about this game is how fast it moves, and it's fast in 3 different ways. Almost 4. The rules are easy. It's easy to teach. The turns go by fast. It sets up simple, and then even scoring during and after the game
Still
is
very quick.
really easy to just go, all right, we're going to score this section. Now we're going to score this section. And I played the game today during lunch hour with 3 of us. There was 3 of us in under a half hour.
Yeah. I was just going to say, this is a 20 to 30 minute game. I know it says 45 minutes on the side of the box, but anytime that I've played, it's always been 30 minutes or under. And that includes a 4-player game where somebody was playing for the very first time, which means I taught it and we got it played in under a half hour. So
yeah, you really have to be min-maxing, and if this game is taking 45 minutes or stretching longer than that, I don't want to be playing games with you, right? I mean, there's not too many areas to get bogged down in this one. And for my middle daughter is 9, she was playing and just plugging along.
yeah,
Like, there are good spots to go to. It depends on the cards that you have in your hand. And you just kind of make the best decisions that you can when you can make them. And that keeps it moving. One of the things that I really love about it, and I think it goes a long way to, and credit to Reiner Knizia for this, and just the game development and things like that. But the fact that the draw deck is just draw 2 cards off the top, and you eliminate that whole river type thing that's in Ticket to Ride.
There's no marketplace where you have to choose.
So it's like, I'll take the yellow one and the blue one, and then everybody's got to refill it. It's no, just grab your 2 cards off the top, and we keep moving. And it is one of those games that's like Century Spice Road, where there are several times where people are saying, oh, it's my turn again.
Yeah.
And I love a game like that.
I do too. And what I also enjoy about that is that the off time when it's not my turn, I'm figuring out what's in my hand and what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
And even though the board changes with each play, every time somebody plays a card or a park tile, yeah, I might be squeezed out of a space where I wanted to go or a route that I was building off of. Then I immediately look in the other 2 or 3 directions of where I can possibly play. So there's really not a ton of time for analysis paralysis unless you are completely, if you've got Excel out and you're working a spreadsheet and getting your formulas ready so you get that 1-point win, I could see it. But the movement of the game, the flow of the game, it's one of those things. The first time that I ever played this game, I played it with my 8-year-old. And Doug hears me talk about a lot of Knizia games, okay? But I can remember telling him, like, hey, I think we've got one here. This is one that I think you'll even allow me to teach to you, Doug. It's that easy to teach. Like, I think I can get this up and running with you, with anybody. Played it very quickly after with my wife and with other people. And it's a game that, almost a year later, continues to just stay right where it's at on my shelf. I really, other than when it comes out to get played, I just really enjoy the flow and the movement. I think that is a great connection to Emerson Matsuuchi, just with how it's my turn. What am I doing next? Oh my goodness, it's my turn again.
Yeah.
And that's fun, right?
Well, and it's one that we got a demo of last Gen Con. So, and not to say that we're sleeping on it or that we didn't like it or anything, but it's like takes a while sometimes for these to, you try and get
Bubble
through the games that you can. And I remember being impressed of the demo. You may have gotten a longer one than I did. But I got the gist of it. I'm like, oh, this is going to be...
Well, I was that guy at Gen Con that took a demo and turned it into a full playthrough. So,
Gotcha.
if we're being honest here, I think you moved on and talked to somebody else, and I just stayed there and kept playing.
Somebody was a listener last year until you showed up at that table at Gen Con.
Probably.
One of the things I really like in this game is there are subtle Lost Cities race elements in this game.
Yes.
And the almost the same thing of in Schottentotten, those things that I love about the Reiner games that I love, which is I have 3 pink cards and I'm drawing off the top and I'm hoping I get a pink card and at the same time hoping that nobody else takes that pink space that's on the board that I'm planning to do a huge building on. So there is that tension of just under the surface, and because the turns are so fast, it doesn't ramp up to an uncomfortable level. But I love that risk management or that resource management of how good of a turn can I make it, or should I just put down a building and get 5 points?
Yeah.
Put down a single one, or can I save up and get 15 points on a single turn? And just that kind of internal struggle of when do I jump? When do I jump? Can I wait? And then somebody jumps in front of you and you're like, oh, now what do I need to do to make the board open up again? And I love that subtle tension. And it reminds me of those 2 games, but almost in a feel rather than mechanisms or anything that's really in depth. It's just under the surface, little tension there.
Well, and there's levels of meanness and competitiveness in Knizia's library, right? And where I think this one fits in really nicely with that. You could play with an 8-year-old, but you can also play with your game group, is that you can block somebody out of a spot, right? Let's say I have 1 red house and I see that Doug has been picking up red.
Well, you wouldn't see that, though. That's the thing, is you don't see that. You don't know that I'm collecting red.
No, but I'm guessing. I'm surmising that we're going for the same spot, right?
Okay.
I'm thinking, I'm going to play this one just because I see that he's got 4 cards and he might go for that 1 red. The ability of the park tiles that allows you to extend your route makes it so that it's not super mean. So yeah, maybe you didn't get into the 3 red because it's a multiplier, right? Maybe you didn't get into but by using a park tile, you're able to find a different space where you can still get more than just 1 or 2 points, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you were looking for, I had a 12-point combo. I didn't get it, but guess what? I can still turn it into an 8-point combo. And that still feels good as a player. And so I guess what I'm trying to say succinctly is the blocking in here feels good, but it's not overtly mean to the other players.
Yeah,
and
because
so
there's always places
to
pivot.
Yeah, the fact that both players can be rewarded. I can be rewarded for my defense, but you can still have a good enough offense where you feel like you're making an impact. Has a very nice balance to it that that isn't in every Knizia game. Sometimes a block can be absolutely devastating in some of his other games, right? Lost Cities is one, for example. You mentioned Lost Cities, and it's like, oh, well, there's that 9 card that you had been waiting
for this.
Yeah. And I feel like there are more outs in Sunrise Lane that make it more accessible to play with a younger audience, and even at player counts of 3 and 4.
Yeah, and that's something that I didn't mention in the overview, but there are park tiles that on your turn you can discard any card from your hand to place out a park tile, which basically fills in a space and allows you to jump to the next one, which can be really beneficial if there's a card with a 1 or a building space with a 1 and a 5 right after it. It's like, I'm going to discard this card to put a park so I can actually play on that one and get a huge reward. So that gives you an opportunity to kind of get out of some tight jams in there as well.
And it just allows you to get to more of the board. And I think in repeated plays, the first time you see somebody do it, it's that aha moment. And since the game plays so fast, I mean, this is a game that you could get played 10 to 15 times in a month. And it's a game you can play a lot because it plays so quickly, sets up and tears down so quickly.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things about this one is that my kids certainly enjoyed it and were playing it at the level of fun that my 9-year-old was having without necessarily keeping track of, I'm going to go after endgame bonuses. And it's like she had a blast just building
the houses.
level 2 houses, basically. And in fact, I don't know that she built a single level house. They were all level 2. And just went around and was like having a blast in her own world. She came in second place, and I like that, where it's like I don't have to wonder. I guess my point being that the kids don't have to be 100% in tune with the strategy of the game to enjoy it and do well.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that there's not strategy in the game or that there aren't things that you can do. But that went a long way for me, is watching that happen. It was like, I'm having fun regardless of how I'm doing, and this experiment is going well. It was really neat to see.
Yeah, and this was a game at Gen Con 2023. We're all the way back at the previous Gen Con, not the one 2 weeks ago. But a couple things that stood out to me of really good price point. I think it was like $35 when it was released at MSRP. Really good art. The box is vibrant. It says that it's 8+. But then when I got the game into my house and unboxed it, my expectations, which were already very high, were exceeded by some other little details. The inside of the box, it looks like a plain insert, but it carries the theme all the way through. Or they've got like the nice brick, but then the pieces all look slightly different, and they stack together well, but the details on them, they just pop, right? It's like I have 4 different houses. Like, oh, which house do I want to play with today? And the colors are very distinguishable. I think they did a great job in some of those details with the production. I know some of the complaints online are, I wish the board were bigger. Is there a bigger premium board? And boy, if somebody has vision issues, I get it. If somebody has some dexterity issues where they need some like bigger, chunkier pieces, I get it. But from where I sit, this game just works really well in how it was produced, and I haven't ran into those issues.
Yeah, and those are 2 of your issues, is being fiddly with your fingers and colorblind.
Yeah.
And you're overcoming those, fine. I do want to commend Horrible Guild, and I don't know if Francesca was the one involved in this, but this game had the potential to be just very bland and not very thematic and not very, like, you could see this game coming out 20 years ago with wooden discs, colored wooden discs, and just almost being a complete abstract game. And it almost is. And it's an abstract style game, but they have done such a good job with the components and the art that it feels like, oh, this game's got some theme, and it puts you into the world, which, if this were set up as just an abstract, I probably wouldn't enjoy it as much. So, kudos to them and for how good of a job that they did for taking what's essentially a very simple concept and making it work thematically and artistically.
Well, and it has a little bit of a toy factor. I don't want to oversell it, but I guess even when we're talking about stacking the homes together, the first time you see an 8 or 9 or 10-year-old kid just pluck the 2 homes on top of each other and then put it out on the board, that has a Lego type feel of, oh, I just built something and I put it on the board. Guess what? Now I have one and it's 3 high, and I'm putting it right there next to yours. So I wasn't expecting all of that in the game. I was expecting a good Knizia game when I got it. It exceeded my expectations in different ways, and it worked in ways that were beneficial for different people in my family. So.
Yeah, normally it's a situation where I'll play a game and I'll be like, oh, they could have done this so much better with better art and made it. This is the only
And
one of the
normally you're
few-
complaining.
Yeah, thanks. One of the few times I'm like, yeah, I could imagine this one being really bad.
Yeah.
Which is
yeah.
usually not the comparison. Normally I'm like, oh, I wish they had just done this or just done that, and it would have been taken up to the next level. And this is one of the few ones where I'm like, even some of the games that we see that are deluxeified, rarely am I looking at them and being like, well, this could have been. This is a game I can imagine being like, that would be bad.
Yeah. No, so for a 30-minute game that is puzzly, that works well with kids and adults, what are some of the skills you see in here, Doug?
Well, certainly there's spatial perception, a game that strengthens the player's understanding of the spatial relationships with the objects in their environment and themselves. So while you're looking around for where that next building could go, and even after somebody taking the spot and kind of recalibrating and looking around, there is that looking at my cards. What cards do I have? What spaces are available on the building? Where do I want to pivot? That type of thing. I think it's not in the same way that a lot of tile placement games are, but that looking around the board and seeing where you can get a fit really works well for me.
Yeah.
I also think the resource management of pushing your luck on, do I place a building now or can I make it bigger? And just kind of fighting that. Do I put down a little one building since I get to draw a card and maybe I get another card that helps me out? Those little, the resource management and the decision making that happens in this game are very interesting puzzles for me that I really enjoy, and I think they really do well. And even seeing my daughters get, oh, I was going to go there, and then you see them pivot and find a new solution is cool. That skill building is happening automatically without guidance from me. The game just allows for that. How about you?
Over to me. Yeah, I was just practicing active listening there, Doug. I wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off anymore, especially after insulting you and calling you a complainer a few minutes ago. Feeling bad about that. But I have a 4-skill bundle, and I just wanted to. I really see concentration, observation, and then both strategic and tactical thinking. And the concentration is almost in a sense of, early on in our podcast, we talked a lot about student academic engagement because that's what I love to study. But there's a level of concentration that if you see like a really good math problem, and I'm not just trying to make that association because the good Dr. Reiner Knizia is a mathematician, but I've got this problem and how am I going to figure it out? If you can bring that level of focus and concentration to the game, I think these other 3 skills flourish with that. And observation is a game that rewards careful watching of details and behaviors in order to understand or arrive at a judgment. Just looking at the board, especially in repeated plays. I'm not talking about the first teaching and learning game, but thinking about how can I get out to these different quadrants and try to make sure I'm first in one and scoring at least second or not last. It has, Knizia has kind of a known mechanism, the Knizia scoring mechanism of if you finish last, you're eliminated, or you have to finish first in a certain category in order to be eligible to win. Well, in this one, it's almost you want to make sure you're scoring first or second in all 4 of those. And then the other part of the scoring criteria, the other part where I think observation is very much present in this game is just looking at how many buildings are left. Just a quick scan of the table to see like, oh boy, Doug only has 2 houses left and I'm sitting here with 5. I better throw down a park tile and get a 3 building out so I'm not just stuck with these at the end. And then the tactical thinking, I think people who've listened to more than one episode know that we that's just a game that challenges players to make decisions based on currently available and frequently changing information as those cards come in. I think that's such a great point that you talked about earlier. You kind of have to sort out your hand and just think, where am I going to go on the board in a way that you have 2 or 3 options every turn, but there's not a sense of overwhelm. So that's where I get into that strategic thinking. You can be thinking 1 turn ahead, not 5 or 6, but just thinking, okay, I'm going to do this now so that hopefully I can do that. But then if I can't do that, I could turn that into a park card and then I'll have this other option. So just those bundle of skills with the concentration and the observation really work with the tactical and strategic thinking.
Well, and if I guess Reiner Knizia is the ultimate anti-spam designer. So if you play games and you do not like a game, where sometimes I can get turned off by a game that is, all right, well, my strategy is to just go all in on this one thing, and I'm going to get 8 million points for it. I'm going to neglect 80% of the game. If sometimes you feel that way and you don't like those games, Reiner Knizia is a good designer for you.
Yeah.
Because almost all of his scoring has elements in it that force you to diversify and participate in all avenues of the game.
You have to move up multiple tracks or multiple areas of the board. And Sunrise Lane is no exception to that. You have to be able to...
Yeah, so if you don't like getting crushed by somebody who's like, well, I've unlocked this key and I'm just going to keep turning it all game long, check out Reiner Knizia's other games, because it is a staple of his that I do really enjoy, that if you're going to play his games, you're going to play all of the game. You're not going to just get stuck on one track and think you're going to do that. If you you can try and spam in Lost Cities, but you're not going to do that great, and it's going to be very difficult to do that those cards are all going to happen to fall into your lap. It's more luck than a strategy. And so I mean, even in a game like Shot and Totten, you can't neglect 3 in a row, or so you have to spread out. And I really do enjoy that about his designs, that eliminate the need to encourage you to play the entire game and all the strategies. You got to try and build a big building in that section. You got to try and get a lot of buildings in those other areas. You're wanting to make a big, long connection. And if you ignore those, you will lose, even if you've built a lot of cool buildings throughout the entire game. And you have to do it all. You have to place good buildings. You have to build tall ones. You have to spread out, and you have to get them together. And that is really cool part of a game, is trying to juggle all of those elements.
Anything that our listeners should be aware of with Sunrise Lane, or any issues that you've ran into?
I don't think so. I mean, it's pretty rare for me to not have something, and I guess you probably addressed the only one of people, that the board should be bigger or the pieces should be bigger. And it's like, believe me, I've played small games with tiny pieces that I'm like, this needs to be bigger.
Yeah.
I never got that impression from this game.
No, it seems right-sized, especially at least in our house and people that I've played it with. It also travels well. There's one issue out there on the interwebs in the board game geek world that people have talked about running into issues with the board and almost like the game board tearing. I haven't had that. But the other thing that I noticed, all up and down that thread, Horrible Guild is saying, please contact customer service and we'll make it right, which I think you would expect from a game company like Horrible Guild. They do awesome stuff. The only other thing, and this could be very unique to me, so I just want to be very clear on that. The first time I played this game, Doug, I got a card, and I couldn't find it in the rule book. I couldn't find it anywhere, and it had like 2 trees on it. I'm like, what? It was a promo card, the double park card that allows you to play 2 park spaces. So I don't know if you have that copy in yours, but
I don't know if I do.
It was the first time I ever ran into this in a game where I had a promo card that threw me off, and that was maybe just my nice little Reiner Easter egg. But just an absolute gem of a game. Plays well with so many different groups of people, and plays well for both of us. That's why it's a game of the week on the Game Schooler podcast. Yeah,
certainly give that one a try if you get the chance. From Horrible Guild, let's move on to the School of Gaming.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we discuss advice for GenCon First-Timers.
Yeah, so this came in as a question. We kind of punted it to this week. It was scheduled to be part of our show last week, talking about GenCon, but there's kind of
we went a little long last week.
Yeah. A little. There's a lot to unpack here with this question. And the question was, what kind of advice would you give to a first-timer going to Gen Con? And the kind of the first place that I want to start, and I think you and I can speak from experience on this, is know why you're going, and setting your expectations goes a long way.
Yeah.
So figuring out, if you can figure out why you want to go and why you are going, it can go a long way to alleviating frustrations when things aren't going the way that you want them to. And Michael and I ran into this where we kind of had one thing in our head, and then the day kind of unraveled, and we're like, wait, whoa, we had to recalibrate and kind of start fresh the next day.
Yeah.
And I kind of said, I kind of narrowed it down to these two things. Are you there to try, buy, or play? And I think those are the things. So do you want to try out new things and just get demos and kind of use that experience as a filter of, oh yeah, I think I will get that game, or no, after trying it out, I don't want it anymore? Are you going there to buy new titles and the stuff 3 months before you can, the rest of the world can get their hands on it, or you're looking for special promos? Or are you just looking for an avenue to play with other gamers and play full games, not just try stuff out, sign up for those? And I guess there's also the part of just being like immersion, just being in that group.
Yeah, can I just add one more into your list? And then I think we have a comprehensive set. I would say Wander, because we also ran into, and you were just alluding to that, but we did run into a number of people that almost had that wanderlust of just bopping around, seeing what's happening. I'm at Gen Con, taking it in.
I like being in the crowd. I want to be around the people, the excitement, the stuff going on, more of an experience as opposed to a specific task. Now, of course, your expectations and what you want to do, it could be all three or all four of those, but just managing how you want to accomplish those goes a long way. The other thing that I think is really important, certainly on Gen Con, is it's impossible to see everything. So be okay walking away when you're fried. Don't let FOMO get to you.
What is FOMO, Doug?
The fear of missing out.
There we go.
I want to consume everything I possibly can at Gen Con in the 4 days that I'm there. But knowing going in that you won't see everything, and make peace with that right from the start. Because like Michael said at the top of the episode, he's listening to other Gen Con recaps, and there's stuff that we missed. We were missing stuff up until Sunday afternoon at the exhibit hall, where it's like, where was this the whole time? Did this come out of nowhere?
One step further. There's people who talk to the exact same people we did on the exact same day, and they got different information. Yeah. And it's not like, oh man, we got out scooped. It's like, oh no, they just approached them they found out about the game that's coming next, or they found out a different story. And that was so interesting, right? If there's 72,000 some odd people, each time you're talking to somebody, you're going to get a different answer. And that just takes me to one thing to throw in here. I almost feel like each day is its own event at Gen Con. I don't know if you were going to go there at all, but Thursday, especially this year compared to last year, because now we've gone twice, so we actually have data. We don't just have one data point. Thursday was a mad rush for people to get the hotness and things that they wanted, the Kickstarter exclusives, the items that only had 100 to 150 copies. So there was almost like a push throughout the exhibit hall where we were. Comparing that to Sunday, the family day, I think if I had to go back and do Gen Con in just one day, I would probably just go on the Sunday. It's easy for me to say that, but if we didn't have the Game Schooler podcast, it's like, well, I want to go to Gen Con, but I can't go for all 4 days. Just a very different experience from Thursday to Sunday.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you mentioned about, people getting different responses, and it's like being a podcast that doesn't talk about stuff that's coming out in the future very often. Those are just questions we don't even ask.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, exactly. What's next for you? We're not going to ask that. We're looking at what's here now.
What's here now? What
are 3 years behind?
What are our listeners going to actually be able to get to? Which leads me to another thing, which is you don't have to buy everything.
Yeah.
In most cases,
And you don't either, Doug. Thank you
No.
for giving me permission. I won't buy everything, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
In some cases, the hot exclusive games are available like 2 weeks later. There are things that it's like the number of publishers that told us, okay, we had 500 copies here of that game, and they're in mass retail 2 weeks from now. That was a
lot. Yeah.
common statement.
We airlifted them here, but they're in the warehouse. They're going to be in trucks. This will be out in October 1 worldwide.
Yeah. So the stuff is going to be there. And in fact, a game like Comic Hunters, which was people were waiting in line and it sold out every day. It came out online like 2 weeks before on Barnes & Noble before the convention. So you could have just gone on your phone in the convention hall if you could connect to the Wi-Fi or get a decent cell service and order directly from Barnes & Noble. So some of those things that there is a artificial hype of get this now or you may never see it again, that in a lot of cases the game is either right around the corner or it's 2 or 3 months away from coming out, that everybody's going crazy and buying. So you don't have to buy everything that you see. There are some small publishers that, maybe it might be hard to get those. And those are the ones, personally, for me, those, if I were buying stuff from Gen Con, that's what I would be looking for. Unless, of course, you're looking for kind of an exclusive promo. To Michael's point last week, when you take out the shipping costs, you take out a little bit of the con, you have the con discount. Some of them can be really good deals. Some of them are not very good deals. So just be prudent on what you're buying and know why you're buying it, and just kind of don't get caught up in the frenzy of, I've got this hot game.
Yeah, now I'm going to get caught up in the frenzy a little bit just to give a little bit of balance of the other side. What is really cool, though, about Gen Con are all the hobby adjacent things that are there. The gifts that I came home with my family, for my oldest, I came home with tea. And it was, I guess, really good tea, and picked that up off of the Makers, what do they call it? Makers Market. Between Lucas Oil and the
Makers
exhibit hall, there's a tunnel where these little
boutique.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Shops are, and that was cool. I got some stuffies for my younger kids, because our house doesn't have enough stuffies. We have more stuffies and squishmallows than we do board games, people. That means we're way too many. But there's all those other things that are there. I shared this story with people that I work with in my day job, and I just got some head shakes. But 2 years in a row, and I don't think I shared this on the podcast, but 2 years in a row, and I had deja vu. We're walking through the exhibit hall on the first day, and somebody passes a Captain America shield to a customer and says, that'll be $500. And I'm just shaking my head like, where's somebody buying a foam Captain America replica? I think it's foam. I mean, the way that thing was getting passed around the hall, maybe it had a touch of vibranium in it. Yeah, but you just see those things. It's like the spectacle of it. And then and now going for a second time, I know, like, well, I can get all my accessories for the year at Gen Con. And that might sound like, fear of missing out. But no, but instead of paying for all those little shipping and add-ons, like, I can get, $60 worth of accessories will get me my foam inserts and all my plastic trays for the year. And so I do like that part of just the market at scale. It is a marketplace unlike any place else. And if you know that going in, you can just kind of plan and set your budget and feel good about it too. That your cash can go a long ways at a place like
sure.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. One of the things I have is, and I'm interested to see what you think, because these are, of course, tips. I mean, I think Gen Con is awesome. It's a great experience, right? And I love it. And these are all things that's like, if I had known that, or it would just be nice to know. I would say that you do not need to rush in with the Sea of Humanity the second the doors open. We did it once this year out of, in this case now, 8 possible times that we could have been there for door opening, right?
Yep.
4 days.
Yep.
And the difference of coming 15 minutes after the doors open and you can just stroll in like you're the king of Gen Con, or you can stand for 25 minutes around a sea of humanity,
hour and a half like we did,
trying to squeeze into a door and watch a whole bunch of people like they're in the Olympics for fast walking, doesn't seem worth it to me. Now, if there's some great prize that you're trying to get, I understand that. But if you're first time going, it's something that's like you don't need to worry about that. Don't just show up 15 minutes after the exhibit hall, and like the difference is remarkable.
Yeah, that's fine. And I would add on to that, the difference in your day will likely be remarkable. If you get to the hall at 8 or 8:30, just so you can be one of the first 50 or 60 people towards the door, so that you're hoping that you're going to be one of the first 25 or 30 people at a booth, that's a lot of stress that can be added onto your day. When you add in, you have to park, you have to do all those other pieces just to get to that point. I think that's a really good tip. I think the only time where I would ever do that again is if I'm trying to get something for somebody who's not there.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, that was really cool when we were there to hear, I'm getting this for my friend, I'm getting that for my friend. There were two people that we were just talking to that the only reason they were charging the exhibit hall, one was trying to get the collector's edition of Slay the Spire for their buddy, and the other was trying to get, what was it? It was Marvel related, or were we just talking Marvel? I can't even remember what the other person was getting.
No, I think something I've never heard of before.
Both of them were there on a Sunday trying to get something for a friend to take back to him. It's like, oh, that's cool. But if you're a first timer, well, Doug is spot on. Well, I don't know why you would mess with charging the exhibit hall, because the amount of energy that takes. Maybe that's just because we're two guys in our 40s here, but I mean, even if I were going 20 years ago, I would tell younger Michael, don't do that. Save your energy. Can I get into food a little bit or not?
Sure.
I think people can go wild on the food carts, and there's a lot of different food options. I will say that in 2 years, neither one of us have gone to our wallet at Gen Con. We pack trail mix and beef jerky, and Doug has some delectable fruit chewies that came last year. This year it was Werther's Original that were the go-tos. But I think you can do Aldi's and take some Aldi's with you and troll around and eat there, and then eat off-site. And I don't think we're alone on that.
Yeah.
We stay at a very, very, very affordable, budget-friendly lodge about 7 miles away from the downtown area. And I would say a lot of those people are carbo loading and getting their protein at the breakfast that's provided by the hotel, and also taking a trail mix type lunch with them, and then you load up and eat a dinner. Hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do with food, and I know a lot of other content creators and those A-lister podcast and YouTube people love the different food cart options. I just think for us, we're on a pretty tight budget, and we make that one meal a day in the evening last.
Yeah, well, and I think that I have in here, my advice for first-timers is also just normal general con stuff. Rest, bathe, eat, and drink. Like, do those things that you should be doing regardless of whether you're at a con or not, and be cognizant that you are doing that.
But we're the Game Schooler podcast. We don't even need to say that. Our listeners are so smart.
Yeah, don't
They're
pass
so
out
smart.
during a demo. Because you didn't eat. Because you didn't eat. I'm just saying that.
That did happen. We were talking to somebody, and they said that person over there passed out at a
It's a very heavy game, Michael. I don't know if it's ever possible to be prepared for the amount of visual and physical stimuli. Michael thought I was going in a different direction. Just the amount of excitement people, like, there is a lot to see all over the place. There's big giant booths. There's stuff hanging from the ceiling. There's a lot bombarding your senses, and I think you just need to be aware of that. I don't think you could, like, I don't care whether it was this year or last year, both times I got into that exhibit hall, there was a sense of like wonder and amazement of like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. And the bustle of people moving around and transactions happening, demos happening, and the amount of interactions and things going around you. And you need to be aware of your personal space and people, walking without paying attention. There's kids around, and just being focused on your surroundings and the visual and physical stimuli that are around.
It's intense.
Make sure you duck out and find some quiet spaces to recalibrate and just escape it for a little while. Because, if you're spending 2 hours in there, by the end of the 2 hours, you're like, I just need to get away from people for a little bit. When you're going like this, shimmying, moving between booths and backpacks and things like that. So I don't think you can ever prepare for it. I think it will always be kind of a punch in the face when you get there. Just, wow, amazing, and the wonderment. But try and take those moments to step out, have a breather, and there are quiet places all around. Like you don't have to go specifically to quiet rooms. Just get out into some of the
You can find a wall and sit down and claim your space.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I'll say is be prepared to make friends. And if you're standing in line with people, the awesome parts of the hobby travel. People are going to want to know, who you are, where you're from, what brought you here, how many times have you been here. We sat down and played a game with a guy who'd been at Gen Con 8. And so he had some stories there. But then when it was time to play the game, he was all about playing the game. And so I think that is another awesome thing to be aware of if it's your first time going to Gen Con. You're going to meet people.
Yeah. Anything else, Michael?
Nope.
All right. So hopefully those are some good tips. If there's anybody in the Discord that's been to Gen Con and wants to follow up or add any additional ones, I know in the past we've kind of talked about just con stuff in general in some past episodes. But I think the big thing on this one and any con is really take the time to evaluate and examine why you're going and what you want to accomplish before you go, so you can make a plan for that.
And I didn't mean to just ruin your ender, but the other thing to keep in mind, the 2 times we go, we're going to get content for the entire year. So that's our aim, and we recognize that that's very different. That's why one of our we don't go to Gen Con to play games. We go to cover, see as many as possible, and try to get some that we feel are really good. Yeah, exactly. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to this. If Gen Con is your con where you go to play and you're spending 4 days in Lucas Oil or in any of those open gaming spaces, you would have a very different take than what we just did.
Yeah, which is awesome. And again, goes back to the idea of planning and setting your expectations. So let us know in the Discord if you've got any other ideas. We'd love to hear it, or any follow-up questions as well. Let's move on to some hilarious games. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, Michael and I are going to be talking about our high 5 hilarious games. And when we're talking about hilarious, we're not talking about that the game is actually hilarious. It's not cards written out that are funny, but the experience of playing those games is hilarious. These are the games that I have laughed the most at while playing with friends and family. Any other caveats for you, Michael?
No, that's just it. And really that I tried to bring it very, very family friendly, So that's where I was coming from on that. Anything on
Of course,
on my
it's a
list
family
and your
friendly.
list. Yep.
All right, what do you got number 5, Michael?
Number 5 for me was a game of the week. I was just trying to do some research to see what it was, but I couldn't get to it. I'll have to do that in a minute. And that's Hive Mind. And it's one that I've talked about in the past 3 to 12 players. And I think why it's so funny and hilarious is just how the answers sync up. And in Hive Mind, a question comes out, and it was episode 94 as a game of the week. And that's from Calliope Games, and Sir Richard Garfield is the designer. And how can the designer of Magic create a game that's hilarious? Well, I'll tell you how. Because the answers that people provide just bring for moments of straight laughter. This is a game that a few years back, and it might have been right around that COVID time, but it could have been a year after. I don't know, time kind of seems to run together. But we played it on a Thanksgiving night as a family, all 5 of us playing. And I coach high school basketball, so sometimes there aren't a whole lot of get-togethers in that time of year. And the stories that came from that one Thanksgiving night as our family continue to get repeated every time that Hive Mind comes to the table. So for me, maybe it's just me, maybe that's unique to me, but I know for us and our family, and we've played it with other groups as well, and tend to have a really good rip-roaring time. Number 5, Hive Mind.
Yeah, that is my number 5 as well.
I'm glad I didn't explain anything about the game, so you can tell people how the game works.
So in Hive Mind, you get a card, and it will be, for example, name 3 video games. And so everybody's going to make a list of 3 video games, and you are trying to match as many people as possible. You get a point for every person you match with. What is always hilarious for me in this game, no matter who I've played it with, and almost every person that I've played it with has been this person, is there is one card that comes out that they say something with such confidence of course this is on everybody's list. And everybody is like, what are you talking about? Everybody goes around the table and it's some obscure thing, and everybody just starts laughing because how could you possibly think that everybody else was going to answer? And it's like, I've been that guy with like, well, of course people are going to put this down, and nobody does.
So obvious.
And other people have done it, and when that happens, it's so funny to get people's justifications of what they thought about or why that popped into their head, or it's like, oh, well, that's my favorite. Of course everybody loves that, and just a hilarious game every time we play it. So that's my number 5 as well, Hive Mind.
Awesome. Number 4 for me is Gestures. 1990. Yes, it's a mass market game. The first time I ever actually looked who the designer is was when I put this on the list. Jeffrey Breslow and Howard J. Morrison. No, not yet. He has not yet discovered this game.
Oh, okay.
But in Gestures, it's charades, but and it's a mass market game, so I'm sure a lot or most people know what it is, but I'll explain it anyway. But it has this device. It looks like the movie. What's the movie clapper thing called? Where you go
clapboard.
Clapboard, yep. It has a clapboard, and you put your 4 cards down in the clapboard, and you must have one from easy, medium, or hard. So there's 3 difficulty levels, and then your 4th card, you get to choose which category it is, and you slot it in there, and you're playing charades. So you have a teammate, and if you don't get the guess in time, boom, the card drops right through that clapboard, and then the other team gets a chance to steal it. This is a game that I played as a kid with my own family, and a game that my wife and I will honestly kind of groan sometimes if our kids say that they want to play it, because they want to play it so much. It gets a lot of play in our house, and it has just brought some hilarious moments as people are acting out what an elephant looks like, or acting out what crying would look like. So charades, Gestures has brought a lot of hilarious moments into our house.
Yeah, great one there. My number 4 we talked about in just a little bit ago in episode 180, and that's Champions from 2023, Repo's production, Frank Critton, Gregoire Largy, and Sebastian Pochon. The juxtaposition of crazy characters on the table, and then you draw out, it's a tournament bracket game. If you want more details, go back and listen a couple episodes ago. But the categories of which one of these is most likely to cry, or which one of these is afraid of garlic, and the people that are placed in those competitions, to me, are just hilarious. And people, especially when you start putting friends and family members in there and you're imagining them in those scenarios, it gets real funny real fast, trying to, it's like, I don't know, is Mother Teresa afraid of garlic? And those conversations that are happening, a real delight to play. That's my number 4, Champions.
Yeah, I had it on my list, and I bumped it out. I'm glad you kept it on your list. And in place, I put Number 3 is How Dare You. How Dare You is 2023.
Yep.
Designers Rodrigo Rijo. And I'm just going to read the quick flavor text on Board Game Geek. Gameplay. One player reads a question. All answers are numbers. The active player must guess a number that is close to but not higher than the correct answer. Players take turn either making a guess that is higher than the previous player or calling out a dare if they believe the previous player guessed too high. And similar to what Doug had said about Hive Mind, where people are so certain, like, no, I'm very certain on this. And then because of their certainty leads to the hilarity because they're actually quite wrong. Yeah. And so we actually played this at your house. My teenage kiddo was getting involved and having a good time. And it's a game that we've played with our spouses and had a lot of fun. And one that could potentially be a game of the week in the near future. I picked it up at GenCon 2024 from Surf and Meeple's booth, and we have a line on how folks can pick it up. So one we might be talking about more later as it gets back to the table again in both of our houses.
Definitely on my honorable mentions. It's some of those 4s and 5s were rough to figure out what went in where.
Yeah.
My number 3, the oldest game on my list, is from 1984. And that is Balderdash from Mattel and designers Laura Robinson and Paul Toyne. And in this game, the one player reads off a word. In now the modern versions, they have movie titles and trying to think, there's another one as well. And basically, the person who's reading off the question will write down on a piece of paper what the actual definition to that word is. And then everybody else is going to write down what they think the definition for that word is. And then they all get shuffled together. The person reads off all of the answers, and people vote on which one they think is the actual definition. Or in the case of a movie, the synopsis of the movie. And some of the movie titles and the words are so ridiculous. And it basically devolves. It's never a game. It starts off as, let's play this game, and eventually it just turns, let's just see who can make everybody laugh with the most ridiculous things. It's like, how can I make it just ridiculous enough that people think it's real? And I love that challenge and just the laughter that comes out. And because only one person is reading all of the answers, the handwriting and stuff like that isn't an issue, so you can get younger kids to play along without like, okay, well, this was obviously not the correct one because it's written by a 10-year-old. And of course, sometimes their answers will give it away, but even sometimes those are hilarious in themselves. And so I just love the atmosphere that comes out with this game, and that's Balderdash.
Nice. Good call. Did you play that as a kid growing up, Doug?
Not really. It's not a game that I came up until later.
Awesome.
So for a guy that likes improv comedy and writing jokes and things like that, it was always one that, like, this is fun. I can have fun with this one.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. Where are we at? Number 2?
Number 2.
Number 2 for me is a very polarizing pick, not just for
Dominion.
the two hosts of the Game Schooler podcast, but also for the Board Game Geek community, because I have it ranked as 9, but BGG has it as a 6.3, and that is Snakes with 3 S's, 2021. Designer Phil Walker Harding, publisher is Big Potato Games, and in Snakes you have a multiple choice question that the group is trying to figure out what the right answer is, and you have snakes that are trying to spoil it. You've got this mongoose of truth who can only tell the truth, and then you have the person who's trying to figure out what the right answer is. I absolutely love it, and I love all the different roles of the game. I just think it's funny, but I also recognize just because it's funny to me doesn't mean it's funny for everybody. There's 2 people in my house that this game just works with, and the other 3 people hate it. But I really like it, and I find all the moments of it to be funny. It's kind of like in my wife's family.
Laughing at other people isn't funny, Michael.
I was just going to go there. In my wife's family, if somebody gets hurt, people will laugh. I'm very clumsy, folks. I stub toes, I fall, I get hit in the face with things all the time. And they laugh, like Doug's chuckling right now on the podcast. But those are the moments. I don't do that. For the record, if somebody falls
never.
or trips, I'm not laughing. I'm
never.
running over to see if they're okay. But in the board game Snakes, oh man, I'm laughing all the time. I'm laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I'm having so much fun. And it's clear to me that other people are as well. But not everybody, based on the rating of Board Game Geek. So just know that before you go out and spend $4 at your local thrift store to pick up Snakes. It is widely available on the secondary market right now.
All right. Interesting. My number 2 is going to be Time's Up, published in 1999 by R&R Games by Peter Serrett. Have you ever played this one, Michael?
I don't know.
Okay, and in Time's Up, there is a collection of, you can play it with like movie titles or celebrities. There's a whole bunch of different things. I forget what kind of versions there are now. There was one called Title Recall.
I don't think I played it.
Anyway, you get a stack of cards. Everybody's going to get a handful of cards, and they pick 2 or 3 out of the hand that they get and submit them. So then those 15 to 20 cards are going to be the cards that you use for the entire game. You go over them one by one to make sure everybody knows who they are. In the first round, you play this game in teams. In the first round, I am trying, if Michael and I are on a team, I pick up a card. I am now using any words I can to get Michael to guess the word on the card or the actor on the card without saying the actor's name. Pretty simple, right? And I do that, and we try and get as many as we can in the time and pass over the ones that I want to. And then if there are cards left, they go to the next player. And you're trying to get points that way until all the cards have been guessed, which is awesome. However, the next time that goes around, you can only use one word. So you're using the same clues or the same cards, but you can only use a one-word clue. You can use gestures, but you can only use one word. And then the third round, you can't use any words. You are only using gestures. And it's funny to see the language that develops to where there will inevitably be a time where somebody says, doctor, 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 and they keep repeating the same word over and over again in like the first clue thing where you can use as many words as possible. And then it becomes a joke that they meant, they're trying to get you to guess Reiner Knizia. Well, then in the next one, it just becomes doctor, and everybody laughs because they know exactly what that means because of the person that failed the round before desperately trying to get somebody to guess. And the way that it then goes down to grunts and sounds and things like that, it just super funny as that is almost watching a language devolve. But become more
and a
sharp.
community develop, right?
Yeah.
At the same time. Yeah.
So it can go long. You can have too many players, but it really is a fun experience if you haven't played it before. So that's my number 2, Time's Up.
And there are other games similar to that. It sounded a lot like Monikers and a few other games that have come out in the last years with the 3 different phases. That's awesome. I'll have to check that one out. All right, off to number 1 for me. This was an easy one, and again, it could just be me, but that's Monstrosity. And in Monstrosity, there is a monster, and you have to describe the monster because you are the witness to the police artist. And so you are frantically, but the time is real. There's like a 20 or 30-second timer that gets set. So you're talking about, it had this big purple head and this big green eyeball. Well, the colors don't really matter because it's a black and white sketch artist. So you can get caught up on the color, or you might just get caught up on one eyeball and get into a ton of detail. And I'm going to tell you a story about this eyeball, and then the timer's out. And then, so as a witness, you are trying to describe that back, and then at the end of the round you're awarded points to the person who most closely matches the monster. So the only bad part about it's a 3-player minimum because of the different roles, but if you have at least 3 people and it plays up to 8, this is one that I've Had a ton of fun with my own kiddos. It's one that in the most recent cull of games and reorganization of the house, it's like I don't quite know where to put this game, but I just know I can't get rid of it because it gets played at after school club. We've had so much fun with my kids in the past, and I could see, especially as the younger kids, age up into being teenagers, I'm looking forward to seeing how this game ages with them as well, because this was a game we played during COVID times and had a ton of just hilarious moments with, and it's one that I'm a terrible drawer. And anyone who's on our Discord, Doug will know about the pregnant astronaut at GenCon, not to get into inside jokes, but in a game that we recently played that led to some hilarity as well. So for me, it was easy to pick a drawing game in this number one slot, and for us in our house, it's been Monstrosity.
All right,
and
awesome.
I should give that one credit on the designer and publisher. Sorry, so the designer is Eric Slauson. Our version came from, I thought it was like a Deep Water Games. I'm not quite actually sure who's publishing in this at the moment. Yep, Deep Water Games, and Friendly Skeleton looks like they have it as well.
All right, my number one is a game that we just talked about recently as well, and this one is Adventure Party from episode 178, published in 2024 by Smirk and Dagger Games. David Smith and Travis Winstead are the designers. I have not laughed this hard in a game in a long time, and from people that I don't necessarily consider to be overly funny and people outside of their element. The simple concept of rolling a dice, making a plan and then rolling a dice, and when you see somebody, they roll the dice and you can tell that they rolled low, and they have to tell their story of how they failed, or even when they do something amazingly heroic, and just how kind of boastful and grand the story becomes as it's being told, is just fun. I've played this game. Never have I played this game without laughter and like tears laughter from around the table when people are piggybacking off of other people's stories and adding and embellishing and everything that goes with it. And it doesn't matter whether you rolled good or bad. And it's a storytelling game with structure that I think makes it approachable for so many people without being uncomfortable or feeling like you need to be funny or on the spot. It allows that humor and that fun to come out naturally, which I think is incredibly hard for a storytelling game to do. And Adventure Party just knocks it out of the park. And watching somebody roll a 1 and describe it is awesome.
Yeah, and a game that I'm not sure you and I have had as much fun with since I think it was Roll Camera, a few years back from Keen Bean Studios, where we played a game repeatedly and just had repeated fun. Just you and I playing together.
Yeah.
And that Adventure Party, I think, is one that's going to be on a lot of our lists over time, because it's one that we both just enjoy so much. You only need 3 people to play it, and you can play. Is that another one? Plays up to 8 players.
Something crazy that. Yeah.
And it moves fast. It's a great game.
So that is our any honorable mentions?
Not for me that haven't been mentioned.
All right. I had Green Team Wins, I think is a fun game. Spyfall and Just One are some other ones that were on my short list. So keep an eye out for those as well. Let us know what games make you laugh over in Discord, or send us an email at gameschooler.com. We'd love to hear even more perspectives outside of just us. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. And the Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. Check us out there. Next week, no idea what we're talking about, but thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.